Good evening, members. It is exactly 7:15 now, so I will start the meeting. It's good evening to members, good evening to Neil, as our only officer today, and good evening to members of the public. Welcome to our planning committee this evening. Move on to items on the agenda. The first item on the agenda is item 1, apologies for absence. The only apology we have this evening is from Councillor Hooks, who's being substituted by Councillor Wright. The next item on agenda, item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest related to items on the agenda? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that one of the very early consultations on this site, I attended the meeting. I had no input or no decision, or I showed no opinion of the matter. So I'll stay and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. That is all, I believe. Now move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I have before me the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 28th of May. It's our last meeting, in fact, I think. Do you wish me to sign that as a correct record?
Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Seconder, Councillor Bowes-Flint. Thank you. Sorry, yes, all in favour. Keep forgetting that. That's lucky. We'll already sign them. The next item agenda, item 4, public question time. We don't have any registered speakers on this item, so I'll move straight away to the major item, which is item 5 of the agenda, planning applications. Remember, there were 2 items on the agenda this evening. The first was application number 23/00706 full, which is land north of New Street in Halstead. As you've already been notified, that application has been withdrawn by the applicant, so we are not determining that application this evening. So we'll now move on to our other only application on the agenda, which is application number 23/02534 full, land west of Mill Lane, Cressing, and that, members, is on page 35 of your agenda. We do have some speakers on this item, so I'd like to call the first speaker to the table, please, Mr. Richard Philbrow. Thank you. Ms. Philbrow, you've got 3 minutes to make your statement, and yes.
Right, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. My wife and I are residents in the section of Mill Lane that's most directly affected by this proposed development. We've lived in our bungalow for 17 years and are hoping not to have to move. We are both involved with the Cressing Action Group, which has campaigned against this development since its inception in April 2021. We are supportive of the recommendation to refuse planning permission and thank the Planning Department officers for the very considerable amount of work that must have been involved in examining the huge amount of documentation that's been submitted by or on behalf of the applicant over the past 3 years. We became alarmed when it became obvious that this speculative application was being pursued so vigorously. When the MD of Scott Properties attended a public meeting organised by the Parish Council following submission of the first 2021 application, he was made only too aware of the strength of local opposition. Between the landowner and the intending developer, there have been attempts to damage what had been a richly diverse, uncultivated field for many years. Even the applicant's own ecology consultant has been critical of the management of the land in recent years. Slowly, the land has recovered from ploughing and rough cultivation, and grass has largely replaced the mass of invasive weeds that followed. The habitat is certainly not as diverse as it was prior to 2019, but it once again supports many birds, butterflies and numerous insects. Members of the public have resumed use of the wider area of the field, including the proposed development site, and it is hoped that this will be allowed to continue with just minimal disruptive maintenance of the grassland and hedges. We very much hope that the landowner will cooperate to ensure that the field within which the application was proposed can become part of a local wildlife project and ensure that Mill Lane and Bulford Mill Lane can be thoroughfares for purely local traffic. Certainly, residents will be very grateful that the existing overuse of the narrow roads will not be exacerbated by the traffic emanating from and serving the proposed new bungalow estate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philbrow. The next speaker this evening is Councillor John Lawton from Cressing Parish Council. Again, 3 minutes, Mr. Lawton.
Good evening, Chairman and councillors. I'm Chairman of the Parish Council, and since the first application went in, we've totally opposed it. The position of the Parish Council remains that position as of today, and we thank the planning officer for the work that he's been doing in recent years on this particular application. I'm just going to give you some bullet points for your consideration. Firstly, this is a totally speculative planning application, and may I say not the first one that has been applied, if you wish, or submitted within Ty Green and Cressing itself. It's previously an unploughed field and had been for many years. As we also, with my previous speaker, there is a loss of wildlife and habitat. Foxes, possibly badgers, hares, red kite, barn owls, buzzards and similar. The destruction of the hedgerow and the increased destruction that they wish to do and also mature trees is just totally unacceptable in this day and age. Again, there's no infrastructure, public transport, medical and shopping. And those that talk about public transport should also be reminded that on Sunday there's no bus services that runs through between Whittam and Braintree, and actually up to Halstead on the 38. There is very strong local opposition, and as I mentioned earlier, we support that. There's lack of safe footway to the station. Yes, bellway installed a few hundred metres, but that still leaves over 100 metres short to the crossing. There's regular flooding to the lower sections towards the railway line. There's no effective drainage runoff from the Bellway Avondale site, and this will be further exacerbated by this proposed development if it goes ahead. There's also intrusions onto views of Brain Valley. Access to Mill Lane is dangerous due to the road width, parked vehicles and not adherence to speed limits. This, I may say, has been raised by the Parish Council and our District Council several times with Essex Highways. Also, there's proposals for Parish Council to take over the community and allotments not discussed and agreed with the Parish Council, and we will require at least 5 years of funding. On my final point, an additional 78 houses, that would increase the new builds round the village and Ty Green to a further, totally just now, we've had 750 awards
Thank you.
And
I can
this
have-
is just not necessary. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, thank you. Just allowed you to overrun slightly. We do try to ensure that everybody sticks to time. The next speaker is finally Mr. Martin Scott, who's from the applicant. Again, 3 minutes, please. And we'll have to stop you if you go much over that. Thank you.
Thank you. Over the past 4 years, we've worked closely with your officers, and there are no statutory consultee objections on technical or design matters. As a result, we agree with the majority of the report. Where we differ is with your officers' view that the proposals are for standard housing and that there is no need for age-restricted bungalows in Braintree District. I would like to mention some points which I believe demonstrates that the benefits of the proposals outweigh any perceived harms. We all know the population is getting older as we live longer, requiring a proactive response, but the local plan is not delivering the required level of specialist housing. Officers describe our proposals as novel. Our aim is to help satisfy the void between family homes and care homes in a positive manner and believe this should be supported. It is stated that the over 55 age restriction is too young and so the bungalows are not for those at retirement age. This is incorrect. The PPG clearly states that one of the specialist types of housing needed is age-restricted general market housing, and that this type of housing is generally for people aged 55 and over and the active elderly. Our bungalows clearly fit this description, and this should be given significant weight. The current policies focus on adapting homes and care provision, but this ignores the majority of people who are still active and want to live with like-minded people of a similar age in a safe environment designed specifically and enjoy their well-earned retirement in a safe, supportive community. In Braintree District during 2022, 29 bungalows were granted planning permission. In 2023, there were 8 bungalows. As part of our application discussions, we provided officers with research that highlighted a chronic shortage of specialist elderly housing in the district. The report references sheltered housing, but this is an outdated description, with people nowadays preferring to receive specific care packages whilst living in their own home as assisted or supported living. The data shows less than 15% of this requirement has been delivered. Our scheme could support the assisted living principle, with all being built to a minimum M42 specification with secure by design accreditation, gold standard achieved on all previous projects. There is a considerable open space allocation of circa 50% of the site, with landscaping including over 1,000 metres of new hedging. The site is referred to as being in an unsustainable location despite recent approvals in Ty Green recognising its sustainability credentials. Our bungalows offer customisation to our purchasers. They have the ability to amend the internal layout to provide open plan living for better accessibility, lifestyle or future predicted needs, easing pressure on health and social service provisions, trying to support individuals in unsuitable and often underoccupied homes. Whilst we are unsure if the Council's claim to have a 5-year housing land supply is robust, we haven't predicated our application on this fact. We believe the provision of age-restricted bungalows offers balance in a housing market which seems to overly focus on the provision of family homes when the largest growth is within the older age groups. We'd be most grateful for your further consideration of the planning balance in this regard. Thank you. And I timed it well.
Yes, well done with the timing, Mr. Scott. We'll now move on to Neil is going to give us his presentation as the officer.
Good evening, members. Madam Chair. So the application for consideration tonight is a full application, so it's a detailed scheme that's been presented. The description of the development is development of 78 bungalows, of which the market bungalows will have an age restriction for over 55s. The affordable housing will have no age restriction. And then there is the additional provision of public open space, which includes allotments, a potential community building, and associated works, and the change of use of land for agriculture to domestic garden. So this is a resubmission of a 2021 application. Just by way of context, there's been ongoing discussions with the applicant over a period of time. The reason that the previous application was withdrawn was a technical matter around the notices that were served or certificates that were served with the application. So that was the reason that the previous application was withdrawn and then the application in 23 was submitted. So this is the application site. So Ty Green is to the east here. So this is Mill Lane running along the site frontage here on the eastern side. This is Bulford Mill Lane coming down here. This is the railway line, so Cressing railway station is just to the bottom of the screen here. This is the railway line going up towards Braintree. You'll see there's a cutout around this property Colwood here, which is one of the properties on Mill Lane, which I'll come back to in a moment. And then the other thing just to point out on the location plan is this blue line at the top. So members will be aware that where an applicant controls or has an interest in land adjoining the application site, they disclose that. So the blue land doesn't form part of the application, but is related to the application as we've set out in the committee report. But again, I'll come back to that later on. So this is just an aerial view showing a slightly wider context. So we've got obviously Ty Green here. This is the Braintree Road coming through from Witham towards Braintree. This area here is the Bellway development. So that's a development that's been built out with some open space here fronting onto Mill Lane. And then this development next to it, this is the countryside development, which is currently being built out, as you can see there. Houses occupied to the front. So as you come along the Braintree Road, you've got the roundabout there. And then obviously we've got Black Notley just on the other side of the River Valley. So it's just a slightly wider context. So this is a master plan showing the site. So again, we've got the red line around the application site, blue line around the top. There's a public right-of-way which just passes along the side of the site here. So it's just outside but just adjacent before it continues across the fields. But what the applicant's proposing here is a single point of access off Mill Lane, which just comes in here. And then we've got the housing arranged around, coming the streets off, dropping down to sort of smaller private drives around the ends. So that's the housing, which is sort of the eastern side of the site. And then moving towards the west, we've got an area of proposed allotments down here, a community building, dog exercise area, and then we've got an area of open space, which will have a number of uses, which will include surface water drainage. So this is just coming into the actual site, looking at the layout of the housing. So you can see we've got a range of 1 to 4 bedroom properties. There's a mix of affordable housing in there, so there's a policy compliant level of 40% affordable housing which is being proposed. So you can see the market housing is the ones that are edged in blue. We've got the affordable rent properties in green, and then the pinky colour is the shared ownership of the intermediate housing. So you can see those dotted around the site. So in terms of sort of the measurables, if you like, which members always are interested to hear about, we can confirm that all of the properties are provided with gardens which meet or exceed private amenity spaces. So that's the scheme or the drawing on the left. And there's a policy compliant level or in excess of policy compliant level of vehicle parking. So you can see all properties have got their parking on plot to the sides, some with additional garages as well, and the blue denotes the visitor parking, which is dotted around the site as well. So as you'll have seen within the application, there's been a number of discussions and revisions made. The applicants sought to address concerns that were raised by the Council's urban design consultant, but also the fire service and highway authority. So that's led to some minor changes to the layout and around the access to address issues there. We've also seen an amendment to the layout of the allotments and the boundary treatments there, changes to the elevational design of the community building, and also changes to some of the housing in terms of the elevational treatment, but also the internal configuration of the property. So one of the things that officers were concerned about was that there wasn't strong enough natural surveillance of the open space, but the applicants reconfigured the internal accommodation to make more active frontage to the properties which look over the open space. And there's further amendments in terms of reduction in roof pitch, which again was sort of asked for by officers. So as a whole, the revisions have addressed the issues that have been raised by the consultees, so the fire service and the highways, who are statutory consultees, and our urban design consultant internally. So there's quite a number of house types, so members have had a chance to look at those on the website previously, so I'm not going to go through all of those because that would take quite some time, but I've just included a number of the different house types just to show or give a feel of the type of accommodation and the types of properties that we're looking at here. So just to highlight on here, so these are some of the changes that the applicants introduced. So one of the features on the college site where they've previously developed that officers quite like from an urban design point of view was the use of render panels, which is also something which is sort of characteristic in the village. So some of the properties have now got these panels added, which is an enhancement which we supported. So just moving through. So you can see obviously all bungalows, but different porch types, different detailing, different use of materials. So then just how it all sort of hangs together. So we've got some illustrative street scenes just to show what some of the streets through the development would look like and how the houses would stand alongside each other. So you can see that not a huge palette of materials because that wasn't considered appropriate, but you can see some variety there and some interest in the street scenes that are being shown. So from a design point of view, officers don't take any exception or objection to the design approach which has been taken within the development itself. So there is, as is often the case, the need to remove some hedgerow to facilitate the entrance to the site. So there's been some revisions to this. So the Highway Authority requested that the access arrangements be changed to provide an additional crossing point just to the north of the entrance here to extend this footway round. So that's what led to some revisions. But you can see here what the applicant's done is provided an extract which shows sort of more neatly the extent of the hedgerow. So this is the main length of hedgerow that's being removed. So there's a bit of facing back, which is just this blue on either side to achieve the visibility displays at the crossing point. But the red hatch is the extent of hedge that would need to be removed. So you can see that's just under 35 metres in total. In terms of other vegetation loss, it's relatively limited. There's a little bit just to the side here at the back of that property and a small little area just up there of hedge being removed. But certainly in terms of impact, it's the loss of the hedge there on Mill Lane which would be most noticeable. This is the land maintenance plan, which we wouldn't usually show, but I've included it because it shows neatly, or more neatly, this area around Colwood. So one of the things that the applicants proposed is that the green hatched area would be offered to the occupants of Colwood so that they could have an extended garden and have a better relationship to the new development, because obviously they're just backing onto a field at the moment. So in the 106 that was drafted, that's been included as an obligation that the developer offers that to the owner of the property for a nominal fee. Obviously we can't force the owner to take it, but the offer is there. But that's why that was included in the description of development, because part of the application site, small part, is change of use from agricultural field to domestic garden associated with Colwood. But you can just see here the majority of the landscaped area and the open space around would be managed by a management company. The allotments site down here in the community building, as we've set out in the committee report, would be offered to the parish council if they wanted to take those. And then the blue hatched areas are the SUDS features which are proposed to be adopted by Anglia Water. So the allotments are one of the perhaps unusual elements that are included. So for a development of this size, we don't have a policy requirement that allotments are provided, but there is in the neighbourhood plan, which obviously forms part of our development plan for Cressing, that does refer to the absence of allotments within the parish. So one of the things that the applicants proposed here is to provide an allotment site to try and allow the parish to meet some of the demand which might exist within the village. So you can see there just an indication of how the allotment site might be set out. And then there's also the community building, which is shown here. So again, this is, I think, born out of the neighbourhood plan, where that does refer to the need for an additional community facility within the village. So it's not the Tye Green doesn't have any halls at the moment, but another one was sought. I've included just at the top 2 sets of elevations. So this was the building on the left-hand side that was originally designed, and then you can see the one on the right-hand side is what is now proposed. So there's just that some changes to make a more legible entrance, some more interest in terms of the materials to the ends, and we think and the plinth as well. So just a sort of better quality of elevations, and you can see here this is how the facility will be set out, or could be set out inside. Now, as we've explained, the applicant has offered to provide this building, but it is conditional on the parish council wanting to take it. So again, the 106, which was being prepared earlier in the process, provides a mechanism whereby the building would be offered to the parish council, and if the parish council committed to take it on, then it would be provided and transferred to the parish council. If the parish council didn't want to take it on, then the obligation or the requirement to build it would fall away. So the offer's there from the applicant, but it's important that members understand that when we're discussing the benefits, whilst we as officers feel we can attach some benefit to the fact that community building could be provided, because it's not a definite, that tempers the weight, because it would be dependent on the parish council agreeing to take it on if it were to be offered in the future. So it's got some photos to just sort of show the site contents. So this is looking just on the corner of Mill Lane and Bulford Mill Lane. So this is Bulford Mill Lane, just going down towards the train station. This is looking along the site frontage along Mill Lane. And then you can see here, this is the start of the footpath, which was put in as part of, or as an obligation by Bellway when they built the development on the other side of the road. So there's this crossing point as you come over on Mill Lane, and then you can actually walk down. So we'll just go into the next photo. You can see the footway runs down the edge of the field. This is an adopted footway with Essex County Council street lighting. So that's running down. It doesn't go as far as the station, so it goes down towards the bottom of the field, and then walkers would come back out onto Mill Lane. And I think, as Mr Lawton referenced at question time, the last 100 metres or so, if you're walking to the station, you'd be walking within the carriageway down towards the station. The photo on the right-hand side here is just at the top of the site, so it's just looking over. So this is the current boundary to Colwood in here, so part of this would be where that garden extension would go. And then this is sort of almost maybe a third of the way down the site, so this is looking back up, the photo on the left-hand side. So this is looking back up towards Colwood here, and then this is looking across the field, so you can see some of the power lines that run over the site at the moment. And then some more photos. So this is at the top of the field looking down, so that's sloping down with those bigger pylons at the bottom. Oh, sorry, bigger pylons at the bottom, sort of running down, and you can see this isn't. You can see a number of paths within here. So there isn't. There is a public right of way which runs around the edge of the application site, but actually, on the occasions that I've been out to the site over the years, there's some quite well trodden routes around the field, beyond the public right of way. So again, I think it's Mr Lawton, the resident mentioned earlier, is quite extensively used on the basis of the extent of the vegetation being trampled, does seem to be quite well used. And then additional photos just coming back outside the site. So this is the hedge coming along Mill Lane, so this is kind of looking from the other end, looking back along, so you can see sort of a fairly strong hedgerow coming along. There is a field access in at the moment, so there is one opening at the moment. This is the entrance to Colwood, so the field entrance is just sort of up here, and this is the area just running up here where the hedge would be removed. To facilitate the entrance to the site. And then just looking down, again, just some further context photos. So this is the island that we saw in the first photo. So this is the Bellway development, which is now built out up here. And then this is just some of the housing. So there's a mix of two-storey housing and bungalows. This is on the other side of Mill Lane, facing the site, on slightly elevated ground, because we're still on a bit of a slope here. So just to pick out some of the key points from the report. So there's obviously a discussion in there around housing for older people. So we've attempted to explain where this need for the council to plan for housing for older people comes from. So it comes from within the MPPF. And we've also referenced how older people are defined within the MPPF glossary. As the applicant stated, there is a clear need in the PPG, or clear statement in the PPG, that councils do need to provide housing for older people and describe that need as critical. So we're not shying away from the fact that there certainly is, this is something that we need to be alive to and looking to plan for. However, as again we've set out in the report, we do think that the need, the weight that should be attributed to the market housing in meeting the needs for older people should be reduced, it should be moderated. We have got other policies within the local plan which do positively plan or help to plan for housing which is more suitable for older people. And as we've set out again, there are a number of sites where those policies are delivering housing which is coming forward. So just in terms of looking at the overall impacts, positive and negative, so the adverse impacts, it's principally the conflict with the development plan. So it conflicts with our policies in terms of settlement boundaries. We do have a policy around older people's housing or specialist housing, but that explicitly states that that shouldn't be provided within the countryside. The neighbourhood plan, the Cressing neighbourhood plan, which obviously we have to be mindful of as well, does make reference to some housing being permissible or supported outside of settlement boundaries, but it is caveated that it should be on an exception basis and comprise small-scale self-build or custom-build schemes. So all of those policies combined, we feel, would go against it in terms of principle. Whilst our landscape consultant has looked at the development and has accepted the landscape and visual assessment, which has been provided by the applicant, which is that actually the development would sit relatively comfortably in a wider context alongside Ty Green. So those views certainly do exist across the valley from Black Notley, but what the landscape consultants on both sides, applicant and council, agree on is that the topography would actually mean, and the type of housing would mean, actually it would sit relatively comfortably within the parcel and would be seen with a backdrop of the housing, also the pylons and the wires overhead. So overall they didn't feel there was sort of wider landscape harm. I think from an officer point of view, our concern is this doesn't feel like a logical extension to the settlement, sort of doesn't reflect the existing pattern whereby development is largely confined within Mill Lane and Braintree Road on the other side. We're obviously concerned about the loss of hedgerow and open farmland, which we think sort of adds positively or contributes positively to the rural setting of the village in this particular area. And we think there would be some adverse visual harms, although we accept as landscaping would mature over the period, those harms would be reduced. So set against that, those adverse impacts, we do acknowledge that this scheme does come with a number of public benefits. So there is the 40% affordable housing, there's the market housing, although we think the weight of the market housing, given the age restriction and the access particularly to healthcare facilities, sort of reduces the weight somewhat. We do acknowledge, as usual, that there would be economic and social benefits arising from the actual development itself, but also the occupation of the properties in the future. There's a number of, the 106 was being drafted, the heads of terms had been largely, I think, agreed on that, the point that we got to. So the usual things that we would be looking to mitigate were all covered, but there were things over and above the usual things that we're looking to mitigate that were being offered within the 106, as we've tried to explain. So that generous open space provision, almost 50% of the site, some of the facilities which are currently lacking based on the neighbourhood plan, so the dog walking area, the allotments, potentially the community building. So those things were all being covered, or potentially were being covered through the Section 106. So they would all be benefits we would feel which would need to be included in the balance. and I explained about the community hall, and that's just covering there about the uncertainty around delivery. The other point that we did include, but just to stress, the blue land, which I referred to just above the application site, just up the top here, that unusually, again, is being suggested by or said by the applicant that they would be willing to offer that to the parish council for a nominal fee, for the parish council to use that for additional open space for the village if they want. The additional benefit, as the applicant saw, was that would address concerns that were expressed by the parish council that if this application was approved, that the adjoining fields to the north could also be subject to development in the future, or future applications at least. So the land was being offered to the parish council on that basis. Now that could be secured by a legal agreement. It wouldn't sit within the Section 106 agreement because we don't consider that is something which is necessary or is required by policy or the development plan at all, but the applicant was still willing to offer that land to the parish council to address the concern. But when we've considered the planning balance, we're not attributing any benefit to that offer of that additional land to the parish council. So the other things we are, but not that. So that's hopefully given a brief run through. It is a slightly unusual application in terms of the type of housing that's being offered and the benefits and the types of things that are being offered. Officers have tried to weigh up all the benefits and harms and attach weights to them, and that's obviously how we've arrived at our recommendation. But I'd be more than happy to pick up on any questions that any members have, given the unusual nature of the application, if I haven't covered anything satisfactorily during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Can I just, before I hand over to members, could I just ask if you could show on one of the maps where the sort of there was I think it was a contour. I think that it's the site which is supposed to be developed on sort of a flatter area of land. Where is that contour roughly?
So,
Where does the slope start roughly?
So I would say this is all sloping down. So certainly if you come down Bulford Mill Lane towards the station, that's sort of, it's more noticeable, I think, as you come down the road. Certainly there's a fall across the field. I think you're still rising up here as you're coming up, because those photos that I showed you on Mill Lane, the houses are a little bit elevated. So you're still coming up here, but you're coming out towards the sort of levelling out here. I think the point the landscape consultant was making, and was made by the applicant's LVA, is although it's on sloping land coming down, so ordinarily on sloping land on a river valley side, you'd be concerned about visual impact and adverse impact on sort of character. Their view, sorry, the applicant's consultant's view and the council's consultant's view was actually, because the development is at the top, although it is on sloping land, it's on the higher level, and where you'd be seeing it on distant views from the other side of the valley, it would appear not quite to be at the same level, but largely at the same level. So you're not having a sort of sleepy sloping site where it's more obvious that you're falling down. So that sort of mitigates the harm.
Thank
Is
you.
that okay?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This development is in the ward that, proposed development is in the ward that Councillor Bob Wright and I represent. It's in the countryside. It's not in the local plan, and also importantly it's not in the neighbourhood plan, which is a fully adopted neighbourhood plan. As well as the loss of the hedge, there's the loss of the habitat, as residents state. When the officers showed the overhead aerial view, I thought it was quite telling that this actually would take out roughly 50% of the gap between Tye Green and Blacknotley. It extends right down towards the railway station and the river valley, which I think is a significant issue. On the landscape issues, we've also got to consider that whilst there is generous provision for open space and amenity, there are the cables and pylons which go through it, which would detract from that. And also, although the applicant is offering allotments and other amenity benefits, that would be some distance from most of the people who live in Tye Green, and certainly even further from the people who live in Cressing Village. It's right on the very edge of what you would consider to be the village. In respect to the loss of the hedgerow, the 35 metres, I did look at the developer's assessment, and no surprise to hear that it's a low quality hedge which is going to be removed. Well, we can see on the photograph it's not a low quality hedge, it's a very important hedge which a lot of local people value that runs along that side of Mill Lane. Also, I think important is what the NHS said. It's their usual comment that there's insufficient capacity in the system. We still have absolutely no progress on the expansion of Silver End GP surgery. Ty Green and Cressing and Silver End are all within the same catchment for the NHS in that respect. The two villages combined, we're looking at around 1,500 houses, either having been built, being built, or with consent within a decade, and no upgrade at all to the local GP surgery. The officer report also talks about additional capacity at primary schools would be needed, as well as a contribution to secondary schools in Braintree. That's another point. There is no secondary. There is a primary school. There's two primary schools, but there's no secondary school within the ward, and that's inevitably going to increase traffic accessing education and other services. I thought there's a bit of a conflict in the report, which I've asked Neil if he could look at, please. It says in the report there's no safe walking route to the Braintree schools, Alec Hunter, which I agree with, and yet at paragraph 12.7 it states separately that the applicant has pointed out that when the 250 houses is built on the land off Long Green, which is currently being built, there would then be a safe walking route available to Alec Hunter School. That's not our understanding as local councillors. Our understanding is that that development would provide a short section of new path, but it would not connect to Ty Green, and we'd still be left with the gap, which we've been toing and froing between county and district for years, and the parish council, of a gravel path, which as I passed tonight is once again flooded. It floods every time it rains, full of traffic cones. To call that a footway is ridiculous. So I think that could be another reason for refusal, or at least we need to acknowledge that the report at 12.27 is not accurate. We know why county will not oppose this development, or indeed any of the others on traffic grounds, because it's an incremental thing, and you have to show that each development on its own is significant, has a significant impact on the highway. But cumulatively, all these extra developments in the area are adding traffic to the network. And I'm only going to mention two places because they're two that virtually everyone here will recognise: Galley's Corner, the nightmare that is Galley's Corner, and Bulford Mill Lane, where the residents there suffer regular impacts from vehicles. It's a double right-handed bend, it floods. All of these developments, including this one, will add more traffic to those pinch points. Also, as the parish council says, this would be another period of years of HGV construction traffic, another type of traffic coming through local villages. I mean, we've all had enough, to be honest. All of us who live on the roads, there's two main roads that run between Witham and Braintree, one Rivenall Silver End and then the B108. We are fed up of the HGVs, construction traffic, cement mixers, low loaders that keep coming through and have been doing over recent years, smashing up the roads and pavements. Then in terms of Ty Green being a sustainable location, I see what the officers say, but nevertheless it has very limited facilities and services compared to a town where you would expect this type of level of development to be taking place, 1,500 houses. 1,500 houses are being added into an area, well, in terms of Ty Green it's less than that, it's less than 1,000, but still it's very significant. There's no GP, no secondary school, one small shop and very little employment. So we're looking at a position where Ty Green is doubling in size in less than a decade. And whilst, of course, we support some appropriate scale housing locally, what is happening, and I would say Ty Green is probably unique in the district actually, if many members can correct me for the scale at which it's increased, is completely disproportionate and unsustainable, and from our perspective as local members amounts to an abject failure of planning, which significantly in part is due to planning inspectors granting consents on appeal. Overall, the ward of Silver End and Cressing is looking at 2,000 additional houses in 3 villages. So I think we've done more than our fair share. And the final point I would make is Ty Green already has a very high proportion of bungalows. It's very notable as you go around the village how many bungalows there are. So the idea that we need to be adding ever more bungalows into Ty Green to provide need for that particular demographic, I would challenge. So I'm very happy to support, when we come to it, the officer's recommendation, but I would like, Neil, if you could clarify that point about the footway along the B108. Thank you very much.
Okay. So my understanding was that there would be the continuous link. I will take it away and have a look. The way that we were looking to try and cover that, so as we've set out in the report, we've come quite a long way along in terms of drafting a Section 106 agreement. We'd looked at the county's comments. What we had proposed to do or I think we'd agreed in principle with the applicant, was the county council had asked for a secondary school transport contribution because they were saying there wasn't a safe walking route. So the way that the 106 was going to be structured was, if a safe walking route was provided by the time the development came along and the houses were being occupied, and the county were happy with that, then there would be no need for the secondary school transport contribution to be paid, because children would be able to walk safely to school. So on the point that you're raising, Councillor Abbott, if we've got it wrong in the report and there wouldn't be a safe walking route even after the Persimmon development has happened, if county say to us there isn't a safe walking route, or assess that there isn't a safe walking route, under the terms of the 106, which we had been preparing, a secondary school transport contribution would be paid, so the children would have the ability to get the bus to school and wouldn't have to try and negotiate a route which wasn't deemed to be safe by the county council. So I absolutely will look into the point that you've raised and make sure we've understood it correctly in the future. But in terms of the decision tonight, I think we've covered it sufficiently, and certainly in terms of the 106, like I say, we've done quite a lot of work on a 106. It isn't agreed, so I can't tell you everything's agreed and everything's done, but we could cover that particular eventuality through a Section 106. So the second reason for refusal on the recommendation is the absence of a Section 106 agreement. So I could sort of add to that to make the point about the safe walking route to the school, or make it clearer if that would allay your concern on that particular point.
Yeah, just very briefly, it is our understanding that, as per the consent that was granted on appeal by the inspector, county made a mistake. I think they've actually admitted that in public to all concerned who've raised this, in that the current Cressing Bends will disappear and there'll be a new profile to the road, and that will have a new footway on, but there is a section from there to Ty Green which will remain as it is now, a gravel track. And we've been raising this at every possible level to everyone who will listen. And as far as I know, there's no change in that. So that's the stumbling block.
Okay, I'll certainly take that away and look into that. So thank you for raising that. But like I say, in terms of tonight, I think I don't think it would need to alter the recommendation from officers. We think that issue, one way or another, could be covered through the heads of terms, which are in the 106 reason at the moment. So hopefully that covers it for this evening, but I'll certainly take away the point and look into it.
Councillor Diamond.
Thank you. This clearly isn't a perfect proposal. I can see many issues with it. However, I am going to struggle to vote against it, or vote alongside officers' recommendations. The reason is I think there's a real need for more affordable housing locally. I know that you've got to look at each proposal in isolation. I do understand that, but we are currently in the middle of a housing crisis. And my worry is that if we turn down this affordable housing and we don't accept enough other affordable housing, which I'm just not seeing happening to the degree I would like it to be seen, we are going to carry on with the housing crisis that we are currently seeing, particularly as there is 40% affordable housing in the state. Is there one quick question, if that's okay? The affordable housing, will it be integrated within the whole estate, or will it be in a separate section? Thank you.
Yeah, it's spread across, so it's not in a particular area. So it's something we have considered how best to deal with it, because if you've got market housing where it's over 55s only and affordable housing where there isn't an age restriction, we were a little bit concerned around that. But we think the distribution works, so we haven't got a cluster or everybody together, but it's mixed, we think, in an appropriate way, and we're sort of heartened by the fact that there's a registered provider who's more than one registered provider who would be willing to take the affordable housing on, so we're comforted that they don't see an issue with the older market housing residents living alongside the affordable housing residents.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with both councillors who have just spoken before me. I think there are absolute grounds to refuse this application this evening. I also think likewise there are grounds to consider this type of housing within the district. As the report sets out, we do as a district council and as a planning committee, we do look favourably on this type of housing, but in this instance it's just in the wrong area. I struggle to see how, and I'll try and kind of equate this to how I would kind of want my nan to live. Would I want her to live somewhere there whereby she's a bit remote from services, essential services, as you start to approach that age? It's probably just not in the right area. So whilst in the concept of the presentation, I think there's a lot to like about the housing scheme, the fact that there's 1 bedroom right up to 3 bedroom developments that would appeal to some people. I think the remoteness and the fact that it's in such a rural and countryside setting detracts from it being a viable site to have this type of development added to. And the fact that, as Councillor Abbott pointed out, as you build out towards the railway station, you are starting to narrow that boundary between 2 villages, and I think that you then start to run the risk of that coalescence risk as well. Like I mentioned, I think there is a lot to like about this scheme. There is some really good concepts in here. I like the fact that they've taken into consideration a community hall. I like the fact they've taken into consideration some allotments as well. I think it's one of the first developments of this size that I've seen that type of offering alongside the housing scheme. So there are a number of things that I think we should recognise and commend as part of this application. But I think for the reasons set out by the officer this evening, I think I would be approving the recommendation for refusal for this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As most probably one of the oldest residents now living in Cressing, being born in the house that I still live in, I think I can speak with knowledge of the village. And the village that I was born and grew up in is now not recognisable. And Councillor Abbott's quite right, the amount of development that has happened in that village is unbelievable. It's also, to me, unsustainable as well, because we've got no provisions there really, and the only reason this council has approved planning applications in the past is because we have a railway station. Now, the only good thing about this site is that it is near the railway station, but it's not near anything else. So for elderly people to live in these bungalows, to walk to the post office is quite a long walk actually. That's the only shop that the village has got. We can't build any more between Cressing and Braintree because we're almost joined up now. And we don't want to join up with Black Notley, basically, even though there's a railway line dividing us. We don't want to join up because we definitely will lose the village identity. We've nearly lost it now. The people who, and I know that you don't buy a view when you buy a property, but the people who live in Mill Lane on that side of the road have got the most spectacular views at the moment, and they've got lovely gardens, and they've bought the, I'm assuming they've bought the bungalows because of the views and because of the vicinity. This area here is the last piece of greenery and nature that we've actually got left in the village because the rest has been swallowed up by development. We used to have allotments in the village, and hey-ho, they've been developed on, or they're being developed on now, so they're no longer there. So I think, and you've heard me say this before, Cressing has had enough, and it's not right that we should put any more on that village than what they've had now. And I do understand that not all of it has been approved by this authority. Much of it has been approved on appeal, including right opposite where I live was one on appeal, and the proof is in the pudding of what's happened there. But whilst I'm Cabinet Member for Housing and Health, it pains me to not accept affordable housing but it should not be developed at the price of the whole of the village of where it's being proposed. And that's what's happening here. It's at the detriment to everybody who already lives there that this would be afforded. And it's not necessarily in the most sought after place where affordable housing is wanted, to be fair. We've taken our fair share of affordable housing in the village, and I think that's fair to say that not other people have taken as much as what we have. So for that, Madam Chairman, I cannot support this, and I do support officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Now, I'd like to first state that I support officers' recommendations to refuse this site, and go along with most of the comments supporting that. But one thing I'd like to point out, that the river at the Bulford Mill used to flood quite regularly. Now it floods all the time it rains, because they said when they put the Bowlway site in, this would not affect the flooding on the river. The water drains from that site into the river, and it's increased the flooding. The Countrywide estate is increasing that, so the amount of times that river floods and shuts up road and floods other properties down there is increasing all the time, and I believe this site, by concreting over the grass, will increase that flooding.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've listened carefully, and it seems that the room is predominantly feeling that we should support officer recommendation. And I can see the argument, because fundamentally the officer's report says this proposal is not in keeping with our planning, local plan. And for that reason it should be refused. However, we're sitting here in a democratic forum. The officers have to go with the planning policies which we've put in place together. And the reason why a committee like this exists is so that there is another forum in which the importance of the local plan can be balanced against issues which may not be covered by it. And what I would have to say, realising that my position is at odds with most of the room, is that in any other circumstances, if this was any nearer to being on plan, we'd welcome this with open arms. I have seen so few applications where all these other wider benefits for the local community actually come along with it. I haven't seen such a good proposal, to be honest. I recognise that with any development, you are going to have detriments, frequently significant detriments. But I would say, in response to a number of the issues raised, is there a market for these over 50s houses? Well, I used to run a curtain shop. I didn't used to make curtains, not knowing whether I would sell them, and nor will somebody build houses without knowing or believing that they're going to sell them. So for me, that becomes more of an issue for the applicant. I'm sure they're wise enough not to build houses that would be unsaleable. The other thing that's, to my mind, important about this one is that when we look at these issues, it's very easy to join with the normal throng there is in the smaller and rural communities to stop development, that we're seeing too much of it. But I'm sorry, but the future looks to me like we're going to find there is less control in the planning system, more pressure for us to deliver houses and what have you. So I then look at this proposal and say to myself, if we refuse this tonight, what will happen in the future? And my guess is that this will come back. First step would be it would go to appeal as it stands. But my guess is it would come back. And if the planning environment at the time it does come back is more favourable to granting consent, the applicant is hardly likely to add in all these beneficial aspects like a building for the village and allotments and a dog exercise area and a large amount of, albeit pylon compromised amenity space in which hopefully more nature, more biodiversity could thrive. So when I think about this, I have to look at the fact that I'm sitting here as a democratically elected representative working for this district as a whole, and have to think about what are we trying to do overall. And I think we are trying overall to deliver houses because of the chronic shortage of them across the district and across the country. It seems irrefutable, and we now have a government that's committed to 1.5 million new homes across 5 years. That is an enormous task. And the only way, as we all know, that's going to get delivered is if there is a relaxation or a reduction in the controls we have to stop inappropriate development. So taking all of these things together, I'm afraid, I think it's a really difficult decision to make for each one of us individually. I agree with Councillor Diamond about the need to deliver affordable housing. I agree with others that there is a need, because of our ageing population, to provide more and better suited accommodation for them. And on that basis, I can tell you quite categorically that at this very second, I can't tell you which way I should go on this. I think it's profoundly difficult. I appreciate the local issues and the local concerns, but when you look at this from a wider perspective and look at the future, I think it is very far from clear-cut. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think the next person is Councillor Beavis and then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it was quite a thought-provoking statement made by Councillor Holland, some of which I would agree with, but my immediate kind of thought around that is I've just travelled back from being in the north of the country, and development feels very different actually in the north. You get back to our patch and you just sort of see housing development after housing development. So I'm not quite sure what it is about the east of England, but I'm not 100% sure actually that there is fairness of delivering housing across the country yet. So that's my first point. My second point is it's all very well, Councillor Diamond and yourself, advocating the need for houses and particularly affordable housing, and we know that. But what I'm really uncomfortable about at the moment in our district is, and I'm sure members are aware of, you can't get a dental appointment at the moment in an NHS dentist. There aren't any appointments in the district now for NHS dental care. I'm minded at the moment, and probably will do so in the next few weeks, to write quite a strong letter to our Integrated Care Board about the number of beds available for hospital care in our district. It's absolutely appalling. So I take on the point about the need for new homes, but when I go to my parish councils, which I do month after month, year after year, the thing that they talk to me about is service first. And I really think we need to get ourselves into that thought set about services and not just about building houses. And hopefully the review of the new local plan and the statement of community involvement will allow residents to have more of a say as to how they actually feel about services and congestion as well, actually, in the district. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. I think the point's been made by this committee on a number of occasions that the amount of money the NHS ask for healthcare improvements that arise as a result of new development is a very small sum of money. But that is something that is beyond our control, unfortunately. But I do take your sympathise with what you had to say. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to come back again. And I've listened really carefully to Councillor Holland's statement there. And as mentioned, it was quite thought-provoking. I think what we just need to add to that, just to give some balance, is that this authority has got one of the highest records of build-outs, housing build-outs and for affordable market housing. We are in the top percentile across the whole of the Essex region, and that's, I think, something which is driven by the desire for this administration to deliver on as well as part of its targets, and as part of our commitment to the residents within the district. The other thing I just wanted to draw members' attention to is applications similar to this, not quite like this, but similar to this, that was offering 100% market affordable housing in Gilder Terrace that we considered a number of months ago. Again, quite a unique scheme, and again, I remember Councillor Diamond wanting to support it because it was a great concept, a house builder that only built out market affordable rents to the market. And sadly, again, we had to refuse that because of where it was, and it was in an unsustainable location. The land set out was such a way that the gardens weren't big enough, so it didn't meet the policy on that account. But the concept of it was great, and we would have loved to have supported it, but it was, again, totally in the wrong place. But going back to my original point, I'm proud to be a member of this district council that is up there with housing delivery and market affordable houses. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to come back again. Just two very brief points. With all due respect, I'm a little bit disappointed by these "we must build houses" line. I'll repeat what I said. The district ward that Councillor Wright and I represent, which is 3 villages, are looking at, in the space of a decade, 2,000 additional houses. That is more than 1/8 of the entire district's local plan supplied to the year 2033 in 3 villages without the services to support it. Now, as a rough calculation back of the envelope, I haven't got all the numbers in front of me, that's something like 500 of those will be affordable housing units. That's a very significant contribution from 3 villages. And the final point I'd make, which I hope we can all agree with, is we have a spatial strategy, which is about where the housing goes. And that's about the housing going to the 3 main towns and also along the A12. And neither Tye Green nor Silver End fall into those categories.
Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've had a very good discussion on this evening. I don't disagree with comments made by Councillor Abbott, Councillor Ritchie or Councillor Bowes-Flint, amongst others. I think there is quite a lot to like about this application, but it's in the wrong place. It's not on an allocated site. It's in countryside. Councillor Bowes-Flint, who actually lives in that area, set out very well the reasons why this is not an appropriate development. And the officer's report is very clear as well on the adverse impact on the landscape. It is actually against our policies. So for those reasons, I will move officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, that has been moved by Councillor Spray and seconded by Councillor Abbott. I just checked nobody else wants to speak on this application. Actually, before I move that, I'm going to pass over just to, before we proceed, let's ask Councillor Bowes-Flint because she wants to make a further comment.
Madam Chairman, just for clarification, so members are aware of this, because they may not be aware of it, this council in the last year has delivered 424 affordable homes, the highest in Essex, and the nearest to us was Colchester, which was in the 200s, and Epping laid at 56. So I think we can be proud of ourselves of what we've delivered here. And just remind Councillor Holland, Councillor Abbott, being the ward member, said villages. If this was imposed on the villages that you represent, would you be sitting there saying this is a damn good idea? I don't think you would. Thank you.
Councillor Holland, yes, to me.
But just very briefly to respond to that. One of the realities that we on the northern border of this district live with is the fact that just the other side of the river, as in just the other side of the River Stour, is the town of Sudbury. And the town of Sudbury is well provided with facilities. And what that means is that a district that had priorities other than those that it's expressed through its local plan might well decide to put more houses into the area which I represent. And if that happened, I hope I would take an unemotional and balanced view of the benefits and detriments of whatever was proposed. And that is, Councillor Bowers-Flint, what you will see from me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I will now, I think we have exhausted this, just covered a lot of ground and probably all the issues associated with this application. So it actually has now been moved by Councillor Spray that we refuse this application and seconded by Councillor Abbott. All those in favour of refusing the application? Thank you, members. All those in favour of granting the application? Sorry? Oh, sorry. Sorry, against the recommendation. Sorry, against the recommendation. Sorry. All those in favour? Against the recommendation to refuse, and any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay, members, thank you very much. That application has been refused. And that brings us to the end of our planning application, planning committee meeting this evening. There are no other items to be covered on the agenda. Thank you, members, and good night.